Hello guys, welcome back to the P-Square Biology Podcast at long last. Today we're going to go over an interesting fish, one probably most people don't know about. Maybe some Floridians or saltwater fishermen, anglers also know about them. That's how I came to know them. They're kind of considered a quote-unquote trash fish of sorts. You know, that's mostly from public perception of people trying to catch certain species of fish, mostly ones that look aesthetically pleasing, ones their parents went after, ones that are known to taste good, that don't look so mean and toothy, I guess. And this kind of falls into the weird looking territory. It's called a lizardfish. Don't know what a lizardfish is or don't know what they look like, I don't blame you. They're called that because their head looks a lot like a lizard head or snake. That's an interesting case of convergent evolution, that it seems nature figured out that toothy triangular shape is really good for catching prey, I suppose. And they're found worldwide, mostly around sandy or shelly bottom, it seems. They're not huge. They only grow 10 inches or less, max around 2 feet. I'm not sure how many centimeters, but you know, not too long, like a fistful or 2 or 3, and that's about it. But they're voracious predators, if there ever was one. They're just very highly predatory, especially for their size. Wow. They have big mouths. It can expand pretty big. Not like a snake per se, but I caught some last year off a silver spoon that it looks too big for their jaws, eating my half-ounce silver spoon. The hook is big compared to their mouth, but their mouth expands when they eat. That seems to be the case for most lizardfish. So they're found worldwide, 4 genera. Most of them seem to be Saurida, but the inshore lizardfish, which is the one you encounter in Florida most often, is Cynodus foetens. Grows up to about 2 feet, 24 inches. This is from the Avon Society little book. It's their general description. Lizardfishes are generally small. They have slender, somewhat cylindrical bodies that superficially resemble those of lizards. Oh, heads. My handwriting is hard to read sometimes. They have mouthfuls of sharp teeth, even on the tongue. I mean, they're pretty sharp, I guess, but they're small teeth. Compared to their jaws, I guess they're sizable, but I mean, yeah, sure, they're toothy. They're predators. They'll eat pretty much anything that they can get a mouthful on. Some of those smaller lizardfish, you see pictures online of them eating lures that are almost as big as they are. So they're pretty aggressive. If you ever caught one, you know, they're shaking around like crazy. They have a good bite. They're an ambush predator. You don't run around much. I guess they're a lot like gar in that they're ambush predators. They strike hard, but then they don't really pull or fight much. But that's just the way they evolved. I don't think that should necessitate the label of a trash fish, especially considering supposedly they're not that bad to eat. They have really white flesh. I want to eat the next keepers I catch. I didn't know last time I caught them. Apparently they're a little bit bony. You know, they don't have too much meat, but apparently they taste good. And Asian markets definitely eat the heck out of them. But I've seen a few people on YouTube that have eaten them. I haven't seen anyone yet that said they taste bad. And yeah, it kind of irked me how the National Avon Society book, they called lizardfish voracious, other toothy, mostly trashy fish, bluefish, barracuda, and cutlass fish, particularly called them voracious. In that, I guess they strike a bunch. They'll eat pretty much anything, and they have rows of sharp teeth. I don't know why that automatically makes fish to be considered trash fish. Maybe because they're not so quote-unquote family-friendly. But I think they're neat. They're marvels of evolution. You know, I'm biased for toothy, aggressive fish. You know, they keep the ecosystem balanced. Alright, so we'll delve into a few research papers. But first and foremost, I want the main takeaway of this to hopefully open up the understanding of marine ecosystems, and that there are many links. I'm hoping to get around to the bottom invertebrate links if I find some interesting papers, but definitely to shed light on some of the more overlooked links, such as the misunderstood lizardfish, as well as other trash fish, like why are bluefish and Drac creval considered trash fish when people love catching them, they eat them, at least every once in a while. They might not be the best eating fish, but you know, I see it time and time again. People are saying these are the most underrated fish. Well, if everyone's saying it's underrated, then it's rated pretty good. You know, they don't get the attention of more, you know, the more well-established game fish. Not that rank among the fishing community is too important, but it factors in with conservation, at least in the state of Florida, because the game fish are much more regulated and protected than the trash fish, jack crevalle, lizardfish, bluefish. Well, bluefish are regulated a little bit. I guess they're considered game fish in some areas, but Spanish mackerel is a little bit of a gray area. It's mostly considered a game fish, And even if they're not particularly overfished, they still definitely need protection. They can be overfished, which in the papers, the main threats to lizardfish, since anglers aren't really keeping them, they throw them back. Nasty little lizardfish, right? Most people don't know you can eat them. It's mostly the shrimp trawlers that overexploit them. Though, as one paper said, they're highly fecund. They reproduce a lot at a young age. They're not too sensitive to overfishing as to, say, sharks that take a long time to reach reproductive age. But it seems they can definitely still be overexploited, although there have been less research papers in recent years about lizardfish, I guess because of the reliance on imported shrimp over... they still harvest a lot of shrimp out of the Gulf of Mexico, which is the areas I'll be covering. And of course, the inshore lizardfish, the one I've caught, and most people in the Gulf of Mexico encounter. Although I know there's a lot of different species of lizardfish, but they seem fairly similar, at least in appearance and general lifestyle. Most of them don't get much larger than a foot or 2 feet. They only live to around 7 to 9 years. So, it's a bony fish. It doesn't live very long. It reproduces a lot, but it's still a very inherently interesting predator, in my opinion. So I want to clarify what I meant by junky fish. Of course, I was a saltwater angler far before I was into marine sciences and thinking about an ecosystem approach. People naturally want to think, what is this fish doing for me? I want to catch some good fighting, good eating snook, not some junky, worthless pufferfish, right? Well, if we leave all the pufferfish we catch on the pier and let them die, the pufferfish levels decline, and then before you know it, you have too much, smaller invertebrate prey, and it throws the ecosystem out of whack. That's a highly hypothetical situation, but I've seen it. People leaving their quote-unquote junk fish on the pier, they don't even care about releasing it. At least toss it back in the water. Come on, have some respect. They don't have to be your favorite fish, but, people tend to understand a lot more nowadays than they did perhaps several decades ago when they would just kill sharks. They thought that they were making the ocean safer. There's still a lot of people that seem to disrespect certain types of fish that are not very good catching, not good fighting, good eating fish that just look really weird, but they deserve respect and they're a part of the ecosystem, and we should realize how privileged we are to be able to fish. And that variety is the spice of life. Sure, you might not like catching filefish, lizardfish, pufferfish, sand perch, whatever you're catching. I don't like catching sea robins or batfish on sabikis, but, they're part of the ecosystem. You gotta, of course, follow the regulations. Don't overexploit them, no matter if it's legal or not. You have the shark jaw trade overseas. They say it's legal, it's safe. But if they're overexploiting a species, there's a moral boundary. That's a whole nother topic. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what I meant by a junky fish. It's mainly people's perception of fish, of what the fish can do for them versus the value of the fish of the ecosystem. We don't fully understand the importance of any species 100%. So it's better to leave the ecosystem in balance than to funk it up to meet our demands. Of course, we should protect the larger, less fecund species that are more easily exploitable to overfishing, but at the same time, you need an ecosystem approach to protect the whole ecosystem, not just the most targeted species. You never know how it's going to shift, and that's the complexity of it, but I don't know all the answers. Definitely need to look at the big picture and realize people may say, oh, all these marine catfish are junk. Well, they're there for a reason, they're doing something right. So you might not like them, but at least respect them. Nature is above all of us. I forgot to mention, it's pretty neat. Lizardfish actually come from a somewhat ancient fish order, which I think is pretty neat. The order Alopiforms, which are mostly considered lizardfish and allies, but it also includes really cool looking fish that washes in or caught as a bycatch sometimes, called a lancet fish. Definitely one of the coolest looking fish in my opinion. Has these fang-like teeth. Kind of resembles like a marlin or mackerel, but it has like a sailfish fin, a forked tail, and it's just overall it's eel-like. But definitely those fangs make it look pretty cool. And of course you have the pretty looking variegated lizardfish, which which I think lives in the Atlantic, if not the Gulf of Mexico, and maybe worldwide. Let me double check on that. People consider them a trash fish, and then you look at a variegated lizardfish. That's not a trash fish. That's a pretty fish, right? It's a predator. Oh, West Pacific and Indian Ocean. Okay, maybe I was wrong. Max 40 centimeters. Okay, that sounds pretty standard for... Well, then again, general fish from the Pacific, I think, are usually prettier than the Atlantic fish. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just reef fish. There's a lot of animals we think are weird that we're just accustomed to. Elephants, aardvarks, anteaters, right? Giraffes. Oh, and the deep sea lizardfish, that thing is really nightmarish, freakish looking. In that, it's full of razor sharp teeth, has a big eye, but it's also like albino looking. So if you look up like nightmare fish, that might pop up. Actually, let me double check just for fun. Nightmare fish. Let's see, Google images. Okay, you got some prehistoric looking stuff. You got lionfish. What? Oh, frill shark. Yeah, those are pretty freaking looking up close. I think frill sharks are more frill, Frill. Very prehistoric looking shark. They're pretty neat. Piranha. Oh, there's a lancet fish. Yeah, those lancet fish, I'd love to have a lancet fish jaw, but I'm sure they're pretty pricey. Tigerfish with Jeremy Wade. I don't see a lizardfish, but I need to get to these papers right. Oh, goblin shark, those are pretty freaky looking. I saw a video of a goblin shark with its jaw striking something. Everybody's like, what the heck? This thing is an alien. Like when you see that jaw protruding, because shark jaws are loosely attached to the skull. Oh, there's the deep sea lizardfish. So yeah, if you Google nightmare fish, a few scrolls down, you'll see that deep sea lizardfish. Yeah. Okay. Again, thanks for listening this long about miscellaneous fish, but I think some of them are really neat, really underrated. I love sharks, but I love bony fish too. Bony. They have bones. Sharks don't. Anyways, one of the research papers, this is probably one of the most unique papers I've ever read. I didn't expect finding it. It was covering the biochemical changes over time to fish flesh, which I didn't really realize would happen. Maybe it affects some species more than others. I'm going off topic a little bit here, but I kept some red snapper in my freezer for like 2 or 3 years once. It still tasted fine, but definitely for lizardfish, I wouldn't recommend freezing it for very long after I read this paper. Their meat is it's not thick, I know mackerel, they say eat it within a day or two because it turns to mush. I wouldn't freeze lizardfish meat even if I hadn't have read this paper. Maybe I would, but definitely after reading this paper, it opened my eyes to the hard facts, not just speculating, you don't freeze that, that's not good meat, right? But there's actually some science behind it. Alright, so this paper was called Physiochemical and Biochemical Changes During Frozen Storage of Minced Flesh of Lizardfish, Saurida micropectoralis. This is from a 2004 paper that studied the effects of frozen storage of short-fin lizardfish, which mostly lives around Japan and Australia. There are samples that are kept in air in frozen and in a vacuum type environment. Is negative 20 degrees Celsius, negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 weeks or 6 months. Basically, they found that it was worse off if it was kept in vacuum samples, which I would think you'd want less air, but they found that over time, concentrations of formaldehyde and dimethylamine increased over time for both types of frozen storage, while trimethylene oxide or TMAO decreased over time. Basically, the reaction that was going on when the fish flesh has TMAOase, it catalyzed the breakdown of trimethylamine oxide to equimolar quantities of formaldehyde and dimethylamine. Basically, what I got for this paper, you don't want that stuff. You don't want to eat formaldehyde, right? Yeah. The sharpest increases for both FA and DMA were weeks 4 and 6 for both samples, vacuum and air. Especially after week 4, when I was looking at the data, that's when the sharpest increase was. Don't take my word for it. I'd definitely look into this paper if you're thinking about keeping lizardfish flesh for a long time, especially if you want to eat it. just for fish in general, if you're not sure, I would definitely eat it sooner than later. But it was interesting reading this paper to see that there are actual reactions going on that make the fish flesh go bad. And it's not unique to lizardfish. Apparently, it said this reaction was unique and that rates are dependent on certain factors such as storage temperature, species of fish, muscle integrity, and reducing conditions. Reducing being the type of reaction. Definitely, it mentioned cod, that it was known for decades that it happened with cod. Didn't really say much else, but it definitely happens in lizardfish, regardless of how the frozen storage was over time. I probably wouldn't eat lizardfish personally more than 2 weeks in the freezer. Definitely by 4 weeks, it looked like it was really starting to spike. Still, definitely, the reaction keeps going on. If you think about like bananas go bad because there's a chemical reaction that makes it turn that color. We like to think, oh, it just rots, it's just inevitable, but there's actual chemical reactions going on. So I'll get into some research about studying their predatory preferences or seemingly predatory preferences from shrimp trawl bycatch and other interesting tidbits of data in those papers. I mean, I might find some of this really interesting in that they quantify the data of how varied the lizardfish diet is. I'm going to be straight up with you. To me, it does not seem that lizardfish have any dietary preference. They always seem to eat fish, but they also eat invertebrates. And when they eat, what they eat is so hard to tell if they prefer one over the other versus what I think is going on. They're just eating whatever is more abundant, whatever is available. But again, I hate to take things for granted. You have to look at the data and speculate based on the data. So we'll get into that. First paper I'm going to cover was it's called Feeding Habits and Tropic Morphology of Inshore Lizardfish, Cynodes fortans on the Central Continental Shelf off Veracruz, Gulf of Mexico. That's off of Mexico, pretty far into the Gulf. What they found was they ate 17 different prey items. So they're definitely not specialized for certain types of prey. I thought it was interesting how they had more important types of prey, or at least ones that they ate more often. They included dwarf goatfish, longfin inshore squid, American spiny flounder, which I thought, wow, they eat flounder, but apparently this type of flounder only grows up to like 4 inches, pretty small. Horse mackerel, and broad striped anchovy. But I thought it was really interesting how they had seasonal changes in diet. And that during the Nortes season, Nortes, I tried researching when exactly that is. It seemed to be in between the dry and rainy season. They mostly ate dwarf goatfish, inshore squid. Those two are the most important. Yeah, and then spiny flounder and inshore squid during the raining season. I mean, they clearly eat pelagic fish, but I guess mostly bottom-dwelling fish. I'm surprised anchovies weren't a major part. Yeah, I also thought it was interesting how they're looking at the diet, their stomach contents. Apparently 60% of all collected. This was 603 individuals, so that's a good sample. This was taken from November 01 to January 03. 60% had empty stomachs. 13% had 75 to 50% full. 24.8% had 5% full stomachs. And only 1.7 had completely full stomachs. So most of them had empty stomachs. I guess they have a faster metabolism, or they can, because they're cold-blooded, they can go longer without food. I'm not completely sure. All of the lizardfish were between 4.4 inches to 16.5 inches and around half an ounce to 22.2 ounces, which would be 1.4 pounds. So that's a pretty good spread. Next paper, Habitat and Bycatch Effects on Inshore Lizardfish, Population Parameters in the North Central Gulf of Mexico. This went over migration patterns and trends pretty good. So you think lizardfish, they're just ambush predators, they just stay put, but there's more complexity to that. Where they're sampling offshore, fish abundance was greater in the summer, especially for smaller individuals. Probably because, as it gets hotter, the water has less oxygen, they move offshore, and that's where the prey is. But that's mainly speculation. They moved out to Campeche Bay from an estuarine environment, a mix of salt and fresh water, in June, and continued to do so until October. June to October, that's pretty hot, so that seems to correlate with that. Although they don't fully recruit into more offshore areas further on the continental shelf until age 3. and the majority of the sampled fish were less than 3 years old, sampled in the summer. It seemed overall they prefer sandy bottom, but could also be found in shelly bottom. There were similar densities. There wasn't significant differences, but definitely for some reason there seems to be more adults around shell rubble ridges, possibly because of the presence of predators or increased competition for food. I would think the more structure there is, there'd be more small individuals, but that doesn't seem to be the case. There's direct evidence that they only live around 9 years for inshore lizardfish. There's other lizardfish that have only been found to be 7 years old. Saurida species off northwest Australia. Then one from East China, the East China Sea, lived to be 11. And I thought this is pretty interesting. There's substantial variability in inshore lizardfish size at age. And it's pretty interesting how they age fish. They look at the structure of bones from their ears and count the growth rings. So, the majority of the fish they catch, they're dead, probably from trawling. They can look at these, they called ooliths, and they count the growth rings to see how old they are. They found that, there isn't a consistent size at age. It seemed like, there's really big variability around age 2 to 4. And also, overall, that's when the most growth was, around age 3, so the average of that. That's also when they start to fully recruit in those deeper areas. They stay more offshore the larger they get. This is either in this paper or another paper where I remember it saying the eggs will wash inshore. So they don't migrate inshore. The eggs will kind of suspend. I guess some of them are eaten. That's pretty obvious. But these bony fish make so many eggs, that they don't have to guard them. They just kind of take care of themselves. It sustains itself. Pretty interesting how some of these things in nature, it doesn't seem like it would work on paper, but it tests itself over thousands and millions of years. It knows what works. It didn't go too much into diet, but definitely it showed that there's some movement. I don't know if you call it full-blown migration, but definitely as they get older, they go further out. They grow up in these estuarine areas, but then as they grow older, they'll fully move out to those more offshore areas. The other papers concur with this as well. Before I get into the last paper, definitely one of the better papers, I was just watching another video of lizardfish feeding. Definitely not for the faint of heart that don't like, there's worse things on the internet, but I think it's kind of funny in a way. They call them a snakefish. It's some kind of lizardfish over in Indonesia. It's trying to eat a pufferfish. He calls it a toby. And you can see because it puffs itself up, it gets bigger than the lizardfish jaw. It keeps popping out of its jaw. So not only is it trying to swallow it, it keeps popping out. There's another lizardfish that's trying to steal it. So eventually it succeeds. It swallows the pufferfish. I don't know if it wears it out or just got a lucky break. But it makes you wonder what evolved first. I would think the prey would evolve first because it would be so easy to swallow. It needed defenses like becoming poisonous and puffing itself up, but you never know. Definitely an arms race where, lizardfish, you see the big mouths are expandable, pretty darn effective. And you'd think they just stay in one spot because you see they don't have a very specialized diet. But there's evidence in this next paper, which is called Ecology of Inshore Lizardfish, in the Northern Gulf of Mexico by Sarah Ann Branson Jeffers. This is from 2002. It's a pretty good paper. I mean, it showed this is from data from 04 to 05. There's a shift when they're smaller. They primarily anchovies, I don't know if you've ever been on the Gulf. You see these little inch or two long, really small fish that form massive schools. So that makes up 72.7% of their diet in the small lizardfish to a diet composed of benthic fish, 53.8% in larger fish. I mean, that's less of a concentration. They have a less specific diet, but then again, there's more benthic fish than little bait fish, I would think. And also, they probably move around a little bit more, but don't take my word for that. So the Cruise paper said they ate 17 different types of prey. This paper said they ate 28 different prey, although some of it were unidentifiable. This was surprising. One of the major components of the miscellaneous fish was the Brazilian lizardfish, which is not uncommon. Fish will definitely eat their own, but it's a different type of lizardfish. This one grows to almost 10 inches and is found between 50 to 194 meters. And that's one of the lizardfish. I don't think it goes around Florida, but it's definitely out there in the Gulf. And compared to the other paper, one of the major factors of their diet seasonally was shrimp, especially in fall 2004, which comprised almost 50%. They had an index of relative importance, percent IRI. There was a shift from anchovies in the summer of 2004, the index of 45.7, followed by shrimp in fall 2004, 43.4, fish again in the winter of 2005, 33.4, and squid in the spring of 2005, 47.7. So it's pretty interesting. You'd think they mainly either eat invertebrates or fish, but it shifts between the two. They go on to say, I'm quoting here, little can be inferred about the diet preference of lizardfish beyond the fact they feed at higher trophic levels as they age. That kind of made me laugh the first time I read it because, their prey shifts from season to season, it appears. They can't sample every single season. That would be super expensive. But over a few seasons every year, it seems to me they eat whatever's most abundant. You see they're eating shrimp around the northern Gulf Coast, Gulf of Mexico. And another paper even outright states it, even though it's unscientific to just jump to conclusions like that. Which is why I think it's helpful to just kind of use your best judgment. In science, there's no one correct answer. And that's what really ticks people off sometimes, I think, about science. You can only show this is the most reasonable answer, and here's the data we have. Leave it at the fact that here's the evidence, we don't know for sure, but it seems to be this. And to me, it really seems that lizardfish, they eat whatever's available. Maybe they have some diet preferences, I don't know, but they're definitely opportunistic. They eat different types of things. They don't have one clear favorite. You see they have big mouths, and I've seen them caught on a lot of different types of lures. So, not that you have anyone really targeting them. They might target some colors more than others, but I was catching them with a silver spoon out there. I was untangling one rod, and I didn't expect anything to bite on my silver spoon. Most of the time you need to jig it, make it look like an injured fish, but a lizardfish ate it. They say they're solitary predators, but you even see on the internet, they're not pack hunting, but there can be several in an area for sure. Just because something is not a pack hunter doesn't mean there isn't multiple fish in one area. What you see, no, this was actually in the previous paper. Lizardfish were one of the most common benthic fish of all fish in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Which I didn't expect. I thought they were just kind of everywhere in the Gulf of Mexico, but it might be because there's more types of prey in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Then again, they could be good index species. I've never heard people call lizardfish index species, but I know whale sharks are more abundant around places that have high levels of productivity. So wherever they're present, you can tell something's going right. And I know they're found commonly around northern Gulf Coast. But then again, correlation doesn't always equal causation. This paper states habitat type did not have a significant effect on lizardfish diet, although diet was dominated by shrimp, percent IRI 37.2% in low shell habitat, and anchovies were the most important in reef habitat, percent IRI 26.5%. Then again, I'm supposing that smaller fish, lizardfish, are probably found around reefs. I'm sure larger ones are too. There's some last takeaway interesting points. Besides Brazilian lizardfish, inshore lizardfish were also eating. These are other fish important to their diet in the North Gulf Coast were jacks, family Carangidae, long-spined porgy, rough scad, aka jack mackerel, and sand perch. Sand perch don't grow very big. They look like little snappers, a few inches long. Also, it discussed their movement toward the end of the paper. Of course, you think they're just ambush predators. They just sit and wait all the time, but that's not always the case. This was from a 1984 paper. Sweatman reported the benthic ambush predator Cynodus engelmanni changed its position every 4 minutes and often moved among habitat in search of prey. 4 minutes is still a long time, but to do it every so often, it still shows they're not ultimately sit and wait. It makes me wonder if other fish like flounder move around too. Or stingray. I know they're pretty much sit and wait, at least so it seems. But you see it with fishing. You leave a bait out there, something will find it eventually, right? Some kind of scavenger. There's even a paper from 1993. Golani reported Saurida undosquamis migrated from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea via the Suez Canal. And there are other papers that there's high immigration rates of lizardfish whenever there's trawling because trawling tears up the sea bottom. It catches basically everything. That lizardfish go back out in that areas and repopulate those areas. Which reading it might upset some people because they'd be like, oh, you see, like trawling doesn't affect the ecosystem, but it definitely does for some species. Even though lizardfish are not one of the most hard-hit species you see online, they're listed as least concern, but then again, not too many people care too much about lizardfish compared to other types of more popular, actually eaten fish, not just in certain parts of the world for the most part. You have a few oddballs. I want to try lizardfish. Definitely make a video if I do. So yeah, there's a whole lot of interesting stuff. Again, they're not my favorite bony fish, but definitely if you read these papers, it shows that they don't have a certain dietary preference, and they definitely move around and migrate between, it seems for the most part, they're either chasing prey, repopulating areas that are overfished, or, it's the young species moving out deeper as they grow up, probably in search of those bigger prey, more abundant prey. Because there's a lot of small stuff further inshore. I mean, there's some game fish too, but yeah, I just wanted to cover one of my favorite species. Definitely a misunderstood one. I didn't expect to find so many papers about lizardfish, to be honest, because again, they're considered junky trash fish. But yeah, thanks you guys for watching. I'm thinking about maybe making my next video about a junk fish, but I can't give you any guarantees about how soon it'll be. Definitely thumbs up. Let me know if you like this content or want something about shark skin. That can be really energy consuming, but then again, it's like, so is this. But you try something new, sometimes it just feels like not more effortless, but more downstream effort, I guess. You don't have too much high expectations. Maybe I'll make one about mammals or invertebrates. I definitely want to make one, kind of challenge myself, because it's no secret I prefer vertebrates over invertebrates. But again, I thought lizardfish mostly eat fish, but these papers show in some places they mainly eat invertebrates. It's no secret that without invertebrates we'd all die out, and not just plants. Like, we need all these bugs and sea-dwelling invertebrates, corals. I'm not going to get into that. We could talk all day about that, but definitely if you have any favorite junk fish, because that's fresh on my mind, that you want to hear something about, definitely let me know. Any species in particular, that's about it. Good old lizardfish. Nothing else is biting. Well, that is, mostly people catch them when they don't expect to catch them. I was trying to catch mackerel end of last year, caught a bunch of lizardfish. This year I tried to catch some lizardfish. I almost catch a ladyfish. Then I caught some Spanish mackerel. Don't get me wrong, those are bigger favorites of mine. Much more flashy, fast, bigger teeth. They school. I mean, having those in a feeding frenzy was something else, but having lizardfish in a feeding frenzy, I can see why people would get upset about that, want to move. And then again, you don't see anyone complaining about when Spanish mackerel are in a feeding frenzy. They're definitely stronger and more sporty, I guess. So in cases like that, I can see why they're considered junk fish. But when you have sporty, big, strong fish like Jack Crevalle that are considered junk fish, I just don't get it. Then again, you can probably consider anything that isn't a game fish that's regularly targeted to be a junk fish. Then again, that's more 20th century thinking. I think it's starting to really go away. Be more just about the ignorant crowd. It's like with flat earthers. Why are flat earthers a thing? But it's only a small sect of people. You just can't get too carried away about these, because people are going to think what they want to think. It's just when people consider something officially a trash fish, like, what are you talking about, buddy? It's like with weeds. When I would kill weeds for a living, it's just a designation. There's nothing innate about a weed. It's just an unwanted plant, just like a pest. Pests are more cut and dry, but yeah, definitely when I would kill plants for a living, it'd be frustrating sometimes trying to teach people what's a weed and what's not a weed, and you start questioning yourself. And I mean, better safe than sorry, but definitely we need to be careful about our oceans, just using chemical in general. But yeah, enough about morality. Thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh yeah. Alright, see ya.